98% of women were illiterate. So one may ask, how did you make it? And it's nothing special about me. It's just that I was fortunate to have been born into a privileged family household who had the necessary economic resources, social networks to make it for me to leave the country and to come to United States. And I come from a family that my mother went to third grade and she couldn't continue her school because the government decided to close schools for girls. And historically, the issue of women education in Afghanistan has always been a political issue. One regime would say, schools are open, the next one will say, no, schools are closed. So this has oscillated throughout the history of Afghanistan. While I made it to come to United States to further my education, millions and millions of Malihas just like me continue to be not able to go to even to their local schools and their villages or communities. And it has nothing to do with culture. It has to do with economic resources. It's a poor country. It doesn't have schools across the country. And also a country with 40 years of war. Girls are being abducted. So it's an issue of security as well. So for all those reasons, I made it here. While in this country, we live with sky is the limit, what you can become in your lives. In that part of the country, it's your family situation, it's the politics, it's the security and all that that have enabled for girls to continue their education.
Oh, I think it's really always wonderful to be reminded of sort of the cultural, social, and economic constraints that impact one's, and I'm going to say within quotes, freedom. Um, so you told me many things about that tremendous trajectory from leaving Afghanistan and coming to the United States. For example, you told me that you had to learn the meaning of first and last name because in your culture, your name meant Maliha, daughter of Zulfacar. So I was wondering if you would indulge us in telling other cultural surprises that marked your earlier times in the United States.
Well, there were many surprises when I came to United States. I mean, I was taken from a high school with Afghan standard of educational level with very poor English competency, and I was brought to Western College, which was a prominent private college to somehow succeed. The challenges started, although it was academic, but it also impacted one in terms of how you perceive yourself. To this day, the method of teaching in Afghanistan is such that the teacher will stand in front of the class and dictate the lectures, and students have to take notes, and then we would memorize those notes, and that's how we pass exams. And the reason for that is it's a poor country. We don't have textbooks to read and to digest the material. We depend on teachers' notes. And those notes are when our teachers were students. So just imagine that. And then to come to Western College and sit in classes where you're encouraged to discuss ideas, to discuss theories, to participate in discussions. It's like you matter, what you think is matter, or to be encouraged to think critically. All of those, they were all academic challenges, but at the same time, you begin to think you have choices. You can make decisions on your own. And as you stated, when I was coming to United States, I stopped in London where my brother was studying there. I didn't know what college catalog was because when I finished from Afghan high school, I passed the exam to study architecture. That's what I wanted. But when I stopped in London, my brother looked at the college catalog and said, "This is a liberal arts college. You can't study architecture there." I didn't know the difference of what does liberal arts college means. So he educated me that when you go there, you say you want to major in sociology. I had no clue what sociology was, what it entailed. He wrote it even in Farsi to say sociology. And then he coached me that when you go there, they will ask you about your name. And you say Maliha Zulfacar. I said, "Well, I'm Maliha, daughter of." He said, "No, you're no daughter of anybody. You just say, my first name is Maliha and my last name is Zulfacar." So when I ended up at Western College, when they asked me about Maliha Zulfacar, there was a sense of that you will be dealt with as Maliha. Whose daughter you are, it really doesn't matter. You are an independent entity. Somehow, although I did what I was required to do, but there was a sense of disconnect. I just felt that, is this the right thing to do? Not to say I belong to my family. I felt, am I abandoning my family and so on? But the idea was to say that you are an independent. And in Afghanistan, we support more codependency, that we depend on each other. In this idea of being independent, and even in those days, I questioned, am I independent? What is about me independent? The name that I was given, Maliha, was not by me. The country that I was born into was not my choices. And I depend on my family. So you have to adapt and adjust and move on in their lives. But when you go to a foreign country, you want to interact with your environment. You have to be accepted, what is to be responsive, to be understood kind of by your environment. So the academic exposure to think critically had enormous impact on me, that I could choose my classes. I don't have to depend to be told what I have to take and so on. When you come from a background of limitations, you don't have many choices. You take what is available and make the best out of it. So this experience at Western College academically was challenging, but you had to work hard. But I think what was amazing when I arrived at the University of Cincinnati was that I arrived in late 1960s, and 1960s decade was a decade of war, hope, promises, being landed on the moon, civil rights movements, women movements, counterculture movement, generational gap, all of this, to be exposed to all of those events coming from Afghanistan, were very powerful. They were transformational for me. And as much as educational experiences open a wide range of opportunity and life chances for me, but the social, political events of 1960s had a profound and incredible impact on my outlook about life, about society. And all those exposures had enormous power on me when I returned back to Afghanistan.
You had the emancipation crash course. I mean, everything kind of unraveled. Terrific. So, we have talked about the fact that I'm an immigrant myself, having come similarly to you to graduate school from Brazil. And I know firsthand how challenging it can be to make a life in a new culture. And you just kind of gave us some inside knowledge of really the many dimensions of that. So, a more sort of philosophical questions is what do you think have helped you through the process that is so challenging, and what do you think helped you be resilient?
Well, for me, it was a life-changing opportunity. It was a privilege to come to the United States. But I touched United States from a different angle. I came here as a student, fresh from Afghanistan, and I was taken to an educational institution, a very, very, how do you say, upgrade kind of private college. That was one specific type of encountering or touching American society. And then I came here as an immigrant. For me, I think the life of an immigrant depends on conditions of the entry to any given country. For example, if you enter a country uh, with material resources, with cultural familiarity, or with physical similarities, and with right social networks, I think your process of integration is going to be far more smoother if you come empty pocket, no educational skills, no social work, no money in the bank, and maybe you're illiterate from your country that you're coming. I think you will experience America differently. So my life as a student was the easiest. I came from a impoverished country to a private college. So I had to twist my accent and learn things. And to this date, I can't differentiate between I and E. I try my best. And I used to live on Crown Hill. And when people will ask me, I always said Crown Hill. It's just HILL and HELL was the same. Or to this date, I may start talking about Max Weber, and 3 minutes later, I will refer to poor guy as she. So the first day of classes, I will tell my students that don't worry about that. I mix up that and I can't pronounce I and E. You just have to improvise your way to with some of your challenges of language and so on to move on. But to enter America as an immigrant at mid 30s with having gone through divorce with two minor children was a totally different scenario. And what was, I think, the most challenge for me, that my best years of career was in Afghanistan when I did a lot of my work when I was young. When I entered America, it really didn't matter what I did in Afghanistan. Nobody will ask you, what did you do as a profession and so on, because they will ask for references. How I was going to give references to a job opportunity to say, when country was in war. But what saved me was the two master degrees that I had earned from University of Cincinnati. So as typical immigrant, my first job was to be a secretary. And I didn't know what it entailed. And I shared with you that the guy will give me these envelopes to go to different places. And later on, a friend told me, stop that job because those are called subpoenas. And people can get mad at you to serve them. So I quit that job. And then I found a social worker job. Then I became an administrator, a civil servant. And the opportunity was to move on. But as a single mom, I decided to resign from that position to be with my children because my children were becoming so-called teenagers, and I don't come from an extended family situation. I had no support. It was me and my kids and work and that kind of situation. So I became a part-time teacher in two community colleges in Cal Poly, and I love teaching. And teaching for me is a continuous learning process. And my teaching wasn't really lecturing, it was interactive with my students. I learn about students, I learn about America from my students, and I enjoyed that job. Although income wise, I became poverty line situation. But you know, things happen for your good. And in those days, my son had good grades, and when we applied to colleges, oh, you come from a single mom, poverty line, he received the best scholarship. So those years of below poverty line helped the education of my son. And then from that moment on, I was so eager to find a full-time job teaching. And with two master's degrees, there was no way for me to earn a full-time position. So I jumped back to Germany because when I left Afghanistan in 1979, I lived in Germany for 5 years to earn my permanent visa to come to America. So I started to do my PhD, but when the visa arrived, I had to come to America. And then I got involved being a single mom, so education went away. But when I took my son to college, I went to Germany because it's cheap. In America, I asked, it would have costed me 40 to 50,000 to do my PhD. In Germany, tuition is very moderate, and I lived with a friend who accommodated me to finish my PhD. And when I came back, I made it to tenureship, and ever since that, there was a sense of security, enjoyment, and to an extent, continuity in my life. And then the second child went to college, and then Afghanistan issue came up. And then I shared my life 6 months in Afghanistan and 6 months at Cal Poly. And it was a different world kind of thing to live in two places for 3, 4 years. And then they made me to represent Afghanistan in Germany because I spoke the language and I lived in Germany. It wasn't a career job for me position, but it was a showcase that, look, since the fall of Taliban, we promote women and all that. So I did that job, but returned back to my teaching position. And then I retired, and I'm here speaking to you.
Wow, you just took us all over the world, from Afghanistan to the United States and back to a PhD in Germany to being the poster child of emancipated women from Afghanistan. I mean, this is amazing. So I have a question that may sound a little strange, but having lived in all these places and having done all these different things, what is the meaning of home for you?
When you live in one place, that's all you got. Everything becomes a norm. Those are the options that you have. But when you travel, especially coming from a poor country, living in Europe and living in America, sometimes you felt like a tumbleweed. The wind will come and forces you to find a niche in different parts of the world. But once you travel, the concept of home becomes very fluid. Home is a place that you feel connected, that you feel understood, that people respond to you, things are familiar, that you feel fit. And I think having lived in different places, you interact with your environment, you come across wonderful people, and part of that becomes part of you. So having lived in three different continents has been a fortunate situation because I can cook palau, Afghan food, but I can also cook potato salad. I can cook dal or whatever. I love American barbecues and all that. So you're exposed to more variations, to more ways of looking at things, that life is just not black and white, that there's many gray areas and many more options and varieties to choose from. But no place is complete in itself. And recently, I've been reading a book called The Art of Ace by Stefan Nachmanovich, where he talks about uh, that life is imperfect, impermanent, and you have to improvise. And when I look at my background, I think I just have to improvise and dance through different ways of looking at issues and things in my life.
I love that answer because I think while your life is extremely adventurous and unique by many standards, the lessons you are sharing apply to everyone. I mean, the idea that if we all held the notion that life is imperfect, maybe we wouldn't be, I don't know, running after happiness the same way we do. We would find other dimensions to happiness. You gave me a lot to think about. Um, I'm going to change the subject just a little bit because, of course, I looked you up and I was just enchanted by some of the projects and some of the things that you've done in your life. And I really found a connection with your work collecting Afghanistan women's stories because a lot of my own research really deals with storytelling as well. So, and I think that's a very good thing for us to talk about during Women's History Month, because we all connect with each other through stories. So, what is the power and the value that you see in women's stories?
I think after 2002, when I went to Afghanistan, I think the somehow we have to debunk the stereotypes that we have about Afghan women as confused beings clad in burqas and illiterate, downtrodden, and broken. I think wars mostly, unfortunately, are initiated by men, and men dies predominantly in war. And these women, after having gone for 40 plus years of war, conflict, poverty, insecurity, they had to survive. In their power of their resilience to all that is happening around them and continue to go was incredible. From 2002 to 2005, I was teaching at Cal Poly and also in Kabul University. And there was one class called Gender Empowerment, and I have 25 young girls as my students. I didn't have to lecture, to listen their stories, to listen to their ingenuity, how to overcome the draconian gender policies of the Taliban era. It was incredible that when they couldn't continue schools, they couldn't continue their university, they became teachers. They were running schools inside their homes. They tried to learn how to sew and sell clothes and buy books to learn English, to learn things through computer. And there is a film that is called Osama, that's a story of a young girl that the mother lost the husband and she didn't have a son and she needed uh, the daughter to work. So she presented herself to be a boy. And then it was discovered that she was a girl. And I showed that film to my students, and I could hear laughter, but I could also hear crying because some of them had gone through that. When the film was finished, I asked them how much was that a film or reality? And they confessed that they have been beaten, that they couldn't leave their homes for months and months and months. But then there was such power of hopefulness that they're back to the university, that they will learn something, that they will move on in their lives. And then when I will travel around Kabul to talk with village women and so on, they're so tenacious. Their stamina to just make it work because their husbands are gone or dead or disabled. Their sons have been disabled because Afghanistan is the second most mined country in the world. And in that country, being a economy, subsistence economy, in spring, when men and young boys go to their fields, the mines will explode, and you have sons that are disabled. These women have no choices but to work. And because of the support of the international community, because of the attention of the world community, NGOs went to different parts of Afghanistan, and these women had to cross out of the traditional boundaries that men, their husband were the providers. They became provider. So war, limitation, poverty uh, somehow made them stronger women. And with the help of NGOs, they became entrepreneurs. They start talking about their rights. So they are really transformed women. And right now we hear about peace negotiation with the Taliban and so on. But Afghanistan is a transformed country. And I think some of the gains that women have made in the past 20 years, because remember in 2001, we bombed Afghanistan to free women. We cannot let go of those gains that have been made in Afghanistan. And I'm so proud to say that Afghanistan, next to Rwanda, has the highest number of women in the parliament. In these parliament, women in the parliament are voiceful. They speak out. They defend their rights. It's really something to be very proud of. And somehow in poor countries, politically, socially, economically, they're corrupt. And you see masses of poor people that they're deprived of basic rights, such as access to education, access to health resources. And there are only 10%, less than percent of population of privileged families that they have access to everything. And they live incredibly well. But when the political situation deteriorates, guess what? Who leave the country? People like me. The privileged have the resources, they have the networkings, they leave the country. But millions and millions and millions of people have no choice but to move from one area of the country to other, or go to the immediate neighboring countries, or bear the burden of war and conflict. So their resiliency, their hopefulness, their stories are really something to listen to.
Yes, absolutely. And you also gave us some aspirational guidelines for, maybe a greater participation of women in politics. I mean, we seem to be struggling with that here at home. Um, I have one final formal question for you, and then I think we can hear if there are other questions from the audience. So my last question is, throughout your life, you have remained connected to your culture and to your country. You have pivoted between these different cultures. So, how has the concept of improvisation, which you just mentioned before, helped you maintain these connections and develop a life of meaning?
Interesting, because when you say you is Maliha, but this Maliha, I'm 72. And it's so interesting, by the way, when I look at myself on Google, some people say my age to be, I think, born in sometimes in 41, in another site says 1961, which I love it. In Afghanistan, you're not registered when you're born. So when you ask people, when were you born? They say, I was born with so and so was the king. And that king was king for 40 years. I love that. So I can fluctuate my age 40 years. But I am 72, and I have lived more in America. I think I calculated it was, I have lived 36 years in America back and forth, and 26 years in Afghanistan, and the rest in Europe and some other countries for 1 year or 6 months and so on. So when you refer to me as you, Malia, I don't know how much of me you will call Afghan, except my upbringing to age 17. How much am I American? If you ask an Afghan who haven't been outside of Afghanistan, to say, she's not Afghan, she's American. For an American, I'm Afghan. In when you go through your lives, you interact with your environment, you are exposed to different ideas, to different insights, to different perspectives. And having lived in different places, you're touched, your mind is touched, your psyche is touched, your perceptions. So I'm interconnected to everybody that I have interacted with. When I walk on the street and I listen to different stories, I love to listen to stories. It impacts me. So I'm interconnected with everybody that I have come across with, from upbringing. There was a cobbler who was sitting right next to our door when I visited him in 2003 and listened to his stories and talked to his children, to Stephen Nachmanovich's book, The Art of Is. You're interconnected with people that are dead, that you read their books. So I feel I'm interconnected with everything, with life, with cosmos, with nature, with everything surrounding me. And I have really don't have difficulty connecting with people, because it all takes to listen to their stories. And there's so much commonality among us as human beings than we are told. uh, my wishes as a mother, as a career person, and so on, is not much different than yours or somebody in Afghanistan or somewhere else in the world. So I, I, I'm enriched by all these encountering and interconnections with different environments that I have lived in.
Thank you so much for your answers and your thoughtfulness. I'm going to ask Jamie how to proceed. I see there are a couple questions in the chat. Do you want me to read them?
Yeah, if you want to go ahead, Flavia.
So there is one question here about whether or not you were concerned that the Taliban may take over if the US withdraws.
Um, Taliban is a byproduct of geopolitics of 90s and so on. When I grew up, I hadn't heard the term Taliban. Afghanistan is a patriarch society, a conservative society, a tribal society, an Islamic society with history of Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, and so on. So Taliban is a new phenomena, but it's also part of Afghan society. My hope is that there are compromises, that Afghanistan is not the Afghanistan of when Taliban came to power in 2000, with the involvement of international community, with the opportunities that were given to women, with 20 years of women being exposed to global work through technology and so on. It is a transformed Afghanistan. That Taliban has to consider that, and there has to be compromises. Compromises will be allow girls to go to school, but allow them to go to all girls school. I went to all girls school, and there has to be some kind of adjustment, but you cannot say girls cannot go to school. And there is that we need support of the international community for to make it a contingent that we will give you so much foreign aid, but you have to have consider the gender ratio in your ministry and so on, that the issue of gender equality become part of the policies, that you can gain these benefits, but these are the conditions that you have to include women with the equal level of qualification in your institutions. I think there's so much that the international community can support Afghan women not to lose the gains that they have made. And Afghan women during the past 20 years have thrived. They are skillful, they have been exposed to what's going on around them. And it's a different Afghanistan. And through this negotiation, hopefully, there's compromises between the two sides, the government and the Taliban group.
Thank you. The next question on the chat relates to that. It's from Cynthia Briss, who is asking, what do you think is the best way for those of us in the United States to help foster educational opportunities for girls and women in Afghanistan?
Continue your support. I think during the Taliban era, there were incredible flood of support, NGOs for Afghan women, to create a hospital for Afghan women, to provide educational opportunities, community colleges, openings for them to come here for 2 years of training, to support them market their talents. What you see in the back is example of embroidery. They're so skillful how to market what they produce, or they're known to be the best carpet weavers, how to market their products. I belong to NGO Finca that give them loans to become entrepreneurs in their communities, to take loans and start a business. There are incredible amount of things that we can provide to somehow engage their participation in the economy of the country. Women are larger part of Afghan society. The society cannot function without the engagement of Afghan women. And sometimes some of the statistics of labor in countries like Afghanistan, we consider only paid labor as work. But these women are illiterate. They didn't have opportunity to go to school, but they are very much part of the local economy of their communities. They wake up at dawn to go and fetch waters, to gather fuels. Without their participation, society will be paralyzed.
Thank you. Now I have sort of two love notes for you that I have the privilege to read. One is from Cindy Flannery. I can't quite see very well. She is glad that you are doing well, and she was your roommate. And she would like to connect afterwards. Her name was Cindy Adams. And then Barbara Young, she's waving over there. Barbara Young, who was your classmate in health planning. Okay, and then she tells me about her time in Southern Bahia. I spent some time in Southern Bahia too. My work is really rooted on the ideas of Paulo Freire, Barbara. We should talk about that. And I had the privilege of meeting him. So I guess that's a love note for me too. So I think this would be the time for those of you who have a question to ask it.
Maliha, this is Cindy. I don't know if you can see my face now, but.
Oh, how to do that? Okay, I will learn. I don't want to touch the screen, not to lose something, but we will connect.
I didn't even know that you were still alive, and I am so happy to see you and to reconnect. You are the same wonderful, inspiring, energetic, intelligent person that I remember, and it's so nice to see you again.
Thank you. So good to be reconnected, and hope to stay connected after the session is over.
We'll have to ask our hosts how we can do that.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining the session. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments?
Yes, please. Hi, Carly here. Very honored and grateful to have been able to hear you. Thank you for being you. Thank you for having that drive and that connection with your own heart to just continue on what it is that fills you up. Because as you fill up, you fill us up. And it's kind of cool. On my screen for your name, it says amor, love. And this to me is just divinely perfect and a kind of treat from the universe, if you will. May you continue to lead by example with your shiny, bright grace and zest for life. Thank you for what you have done.
Thank you. It is these words that give me energy, that gives me hope. And these are the interaction that keeps you moving forward. Thank you for your very kind words. Thank you.
From my heart to your heart, thank you.
Maliha, this is Homera. It's so nice to hear from you. I'm also a UC graduate, 1980. I did my master's in organic chemistry, and I'm from India. I also was an immigrant at age 21, and pretty much spent my life here. I'm 62 now, so happy to hear from you. I would love to stay connected with you because I do a lot of community service, a lot of charitable work, and it'd be a nice I think I would want to learn from you, from a lot of your experiences.
It is such an honor to have you to be part of this discourse, and hope to remain in contact. And there's so much we can do towards many unfortunate situations in that part of the world. Thank you.
So I don't think we have your email address, but if you can put it on the chat, that way we can stay connected.
Jamie will help me on that.
Yeah, Maliha, we do. What's the best way for people who want to stay connected with you? Just want me to put your email in the chat? Is that
Yes.
okay? Okay,
Email, yeah.
I will do that right now.
I think we probably have time for one or two more questions. Are there any more questions from this lovely audience?
Flavia, where are you located?
I am, in Cincinnati. I'm a professor at UC. I live across the river from Jamie. I live in Northern Kentucky as well, but in another community called Covington. But I'm right here. I've been here for 21 years, very happy years.
Yeah. And what do you teach at UC?
My field is art education, and I have a focus on sort of social justice through art. That's the core of my teaching and research work. I work with people who want to become educators. I work with students who are interested in qualitative research methods.
Very nice. That's something my daughter would be excited to connect with you, because she's her focus is justice, equity and fairness, and she's very passionate about that. So,
well, I am easily found on the UC directory, and I like talking to people who are doing justice work. So you can send her my way. One of these days we can have coffee with people again, or tea, or whatever you like to drink face to face.
I should be able to get your email address to the UC.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's my first and last name at uc.edu.
Great.
Wonderful. Well, if there are no more questions or comments, we just want to thank you all so much for spending your lunch hour with us. I put Maliha's email address in the chat and Flavia's as well. Please feel free to reach out to either of them or myself. We recorded the conversation, so, well, like 2 minutes into the conversation, did the classic, forgot to press the record button. But we will send that out in the coming days as well. So thank you so much. Happy Women's History Month. It should be every month, but we hope to see you guys again soon.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Maliha. Thank you, Flavia.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Flavia, for your wonderful questions.
Always wonderful.
Very thought-provoking.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.